to allow or pursue military intervention in another Arab or Muslim state, he should, quote unquote, have his head examined. That's an incredibly bold statement for the Secretary of Defense to make at West Point. And I think he made it because of the depth of concern, the height of concern here that the U.S. could be about to go into imposing a no-fly zone on Libya or other militaristic responses. Keep in mind, to impose a no-flight zone would mean the United States would have to destroy the Libyan Air Force that's on the ground, destroy a lot of the Libyan military. That means a U.S. attack on Libya. A no-fly zone sounds good in the air without context, but the context, the reality is, we would have to attack Libya first to impose the no-fly zone. It's not a peaceful method.
And is the humanitarian effort a peaceful method? I mean, is that something that could start to see some sort of military presence to back up this effort?
Exactly. There too, the idea of helping people to get food and humanitarian efforts sounds good without context. But we have to keep Somalia in mind, the U.S. misadventure, military adventure into Somalia. That also started with the peaceful idea of providing humanitarian aid to Somalians. And it quickly drew the United States into a street-by-street combat on the streets of Somalia. We could say the same thing in Libya. While we say to ourselves, here is the United States yet again going to fight the good fight, right? The United States never goes to just project power. We always go to fight the good fight. We do that on the ground in Libya to provide humanitarian assistance, and the next thing you know, we're in dogfights street by street just like we were in Somalia. It's a very dangerous, slippery slope to go on.
So what do you think now will reinstate a positive U.S. reputation in the region? What can be done?
The most difficult thing needs to be done and needs to be acknowledged. The United States needs to step back, needs to allow each of these states in the Middle East to develop their own independent political orders and their own independent foreign policies. The only way that could happen is if the United States stops demanding that each of these countries do things that are not in their interests and are in many cases offensive to their own populations. So for Yemen, for example, it means to stop requesting or ordering the Yemeni government to have drone strikes on its own people that kill Yemenis. It means throughout the region to stop requesting that each of these governments participate in our war on terror to torture their own citizens for information to help us. And it also means stopping to request these countries to keep a siege on the civilian population in Gaza. These are all U.S. policies that we could change. We could protect our interests without projecting them in a way that is offensive to people in each of these states. That needs to be done, but it is incredibly difficult because it means we as Americans would have to really look within ourselves and say, what are we doing in the Middle East? Why are we doing it? What's important? And to recalibrate that.
I'll be back with more news from the Americas a little later on in the program. In the meantime, Divya, back to you in Doha.
6 women have been killed in Côte d'Ivoire during a rally for Alassane Ouattara, the internationally recognized winner of November's elections. Witnesses say security forces loyal to President Laurent Gbagbo gunned the women down in the northern district of Abidjan. Bernard Smith's report contains some graphic images which you may find disturbing.
Shot dead here as they prepared to protest against the Côte d'Ivoire's incumbent president, Laurent Gbagbo. The victims were at least 6 women, part of an all-female demonstration, say witnesses, that thought their sex would make them safe. It's another sign that this country risks tumbling back into civil war.
Our mothers went out to march peacefully. Then we saw Gbagbo's tanks. They came and opened fire on the old women, killing at least 6 on the spot.
And this mortuary in Abobo, a suburb of Abidjan, is full. The 50 bodies delivered in the last 5 days have been piled on the floor. More bloody proof of the escalating violence between troops loyal to Gbagbo and supporters of Alassane Ouattara. The UN endorsed Ouattara's victory in November's election, but he remains holed up in an Abidjan hotel. Foreign delegations shuttle back and forth, but there's little progress. No amount of prodding and cajoling from the international community has managed to shift Gbagbo from the presidency. He still controls the military, though it's not known how much cash he still has to pay them. But Gbagbo can count on his protégé, Charles Blé Good, to whip up the self-styled young patriots.
a weapon has been distributed to those so-called young patriots and actually there's young people unemployed, and we have been instrumentalized by the propaganda of Mr. Gbagbo.
In the west of the country, rebels have wrested control of a small town from pro-Gbagbo forces, another sign of deteriorating security. And according to the UN, electricity and water supplies to the north of Côte d'Ivoire have now been cut. Most of Ouattara's support comes from here. So far, at least 130,000 people have been forced to flee the violence in Côte d'Ivoire. Almost 400 people are known to have been killed. Diplomats think the real number is much higher. Elsewhere in the world, recently, governments have been brought down by figures far less dramatic than that. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera.
A German security official says the man accused of killing 2 U.S. servicemen on Wednesday has confessed to targeting Americans. The airmen were killed when a man armed with a handgun boarded a bus carrying U.S. military at Frankfurt Airport. 2 others were left wounded in the shooting. Prosecutors say they're now looking into what sparked the attack. Rupert Murdoch's media empire looks set to grow after the British government approved News Corporation's $20 billion takeover of satellite broadcaster B-Sky B. News Corp already owns 39% of the business and 4 newspapers in the UK. The deal remains subject to an industry review. Lawyers for Julian Assange have appealed against a judge's ruling to extradite the WikiLeaks founder to Sweden to face charges of sex crime allegations. Documents were lodged at the High Court in London, but the appeal process could take some months. Assange maintains his sexual relations with the women involved were consensual. And Assange has defended his site's publishing of secret U.S. diplomatic communications. This comes as Bradley Manning, the soldier suspected of passing on the documents to WikiLeaks, faces numerous charges.
The requirements given by some of those charges is that WikiLeaks is the enemy of the United States, that a publisher is the enemy of the United States. And nothing in our 4 years of publishing shows that that is in any way true. We publish from all countries who come to us. We are not an enemy of the United States, and it is an abuse against Mr. Manning and an abuse against us to suggest otherwise.
The Military Council in Egypt has appointed a new prime minister. Essam Sharaf will take over from Ahmed Shafiq, who resigned on Thursday. Sharaf, a former transport minister, has been asked to form a new government. Shireen Tadros has this report from Cairo.
It was the protesters' main demand, and on the eve of another million-man march, it was met. The military announcing on their Facebook page they'd accepted the resignation of Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq, the man appointed by former President Mubarak before he stepped down. 12 hours before, Shafiq was on Egyptian television having heated debates. He told presenters and guests he wasn't planning on stepping down, even given the public pressure and planned protests. He also defended the state security apparatus Egyptians have come to loathe.
Friday's demonstration, which had been gaining a lot of momentum here, is still going ahead.